Thank you, Jay. That was beautiful. Good morning. I'm Karen Mazzata. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Huntington's virtual Sunday service. It's good to be together. We are streaming live from multiple locations, so please be patient with any technical mishaps you may see or hear. We're also using a webinar format so we can all see each other. We'd like to extend a special welcome today to visitors who may be joining us for the first time, as well as newcomers who are returning. If you are new to our congregation and want to speak to someone or to learn more about us, please contact our office administrator, Lauren Knoll, at office@uufh.org. If you have a pastoral matter, you can contact our minister, the Reverend Jude Geiger, at minister@uufh.org. We'll put this information in the chat during the service as well. Know that whoever you are, whomever you love, and wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. We have a few brief announcements. Today is annual Stewardship Sunday. After the service ends, please stay on this Zoom link for our annual pledge party to promote UU principles, which promises to be entertaining, inspiring, and brief. About 20 minutes, I've been told. You will be able to enjoy seeing the familiar faces of fellowship friends, which will include a smorgasbord of testimonials and speakers, as well as an especially entertaining performance by Rich and Ken Bewley-Nemar. There will be 6 minutes of music transitioning the service and the pledge party, so feel free to take a quick break after the service and then, if it's needed, come back. We hope you'll attend and help us all stay connected, supported, and linked in our commitment to the fellowship. We hope to see you there. Tomorrow, February 1st, our pagan UUs will begin their celebration of Imbolc, the midpoint between winter solstice and spring equinox. It is a quiet time of lengthening days when it is still winter. Imbolc is a peaceful and self-reflective celebration, a chance to set intentions, light candles, meditate, and journal. I invite you to settle into your bodies and quiet your minds as we breathe deeply together and settle into our time of worship. Please join me in saying our mission statement. The words will be on the screen. In religious community, we nurture our individual spirits through caring for one another and helping to heal the world. Please join me in singing our affirmation.
On different roads we travel here to meet as one on common ground, to seek the truth with open minds, with loving hearts and helping hands.
Our chalice lighting words this morning come from the UU minister, Reverend Christian Grassel-Schmidt. Breath of life, you're in the baby's laugh, in every question that leads us deeper, in tender words to those in pain. You are there in the prophet's call for justice, in the cries of those with no hope, in forgiveness and forgiving, in this time made sacred by our presence, by gathering together in the name of love and truth. Draw us close to one another, and then guide us out to serve those hungry, suffering, and lonely, and in so doing, lead us into life abundant, a life where we can find home and hearth in it all. Come, let us worship together. Morning, everyone. Our story this morning is might be familiar to many of you. This is an adaptation of David and Goliath by the Reverend Chris Weiss, who's the minister at the Tennessee Valley UU congregation. Once there was a little girl who worried about a very big problem. world hunger. She read in the newspaper about children all over the world do not have enough to eat. She wanted to do something about it, but she was only a little girl, and this was a giant problem. What could she possibly do that would make a difference? One day, when she was feeling sad about the situation, she told her father that what was on her mind. After listening to her problem, he was very quiet. Then he scratched his head and rubbed his chin. He cleaned his glasses with a handkerchief, and then he said, "Young lady, maybe it's time I told you a story," and began to tell her about David and Goliath. David was a little boy who had a very big problem, Goliath. David lived in a land called Israel, and the Philistine soldiers were threatening to invade his country. The very biggest Philistine soldier was named Goliath, who told the people of Israel, "If you can find one person who can beat me in a fight, then we will not invade your country." But there was no one in all of Israel who thought they could beat Goliath. He's much too tall and strong, the people said. This problem is just too big for us. There's nothing we can do about it. David was surprised that no one would fight Goliath. So he went to the king of Israel and told him, "I will fight Goliath." The king looked down at the boy. He did not want to send such a small fellow to fight such a big man. Because no one else had volunteered, he said to David, "I admire your courage, young man. I'll give you the best armor in my kingdom." But when David put on the armor, he fell straight down to the ground. After all, David was just a little guy, and the armor was very heavy. And so David said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I think I'll just use my sling." The king was surprised by the boy's courage, and he said, "Go forth, and may God be with you." David went out into the battlefield, and facing Goliath, he said, "I am ready to fight." When Goliath saw this little guy standing before him, he began to laugh. "You're only a boy," he chuckled, and then he began to roar with laughter. While Goliath was laughing, David put a rock in his sling, twirled it around, and let the rock fly. The rock hit Goliath in the head, and the giant came crashing to the ground. David was the hero. "That's a great story, Dad," said the little girl, "but what does it have to do with me?" "David lived a long time ago," said her father, "but the world has still giant problems: hunger, pollution, wars. We can do something about that." He got up from his chair and walked over to the couch and began tossing cushions everywhere. "Dad, what in the world are you doing?" "I'm looking for spare change. You know how it always falls down in the cushions?" "But why do you want spare change?" "I'm putting all my spare change into a box, and I'm going to give that money to charity that helps feed the hungry." "But what difference will that make?" asked the girl. "Well, see for yourself," he said, and he lifted up the cushions. When what she saw gave her a surprise. Scattered underneath the cushions were dozens of coins, and how they shined and glimmered. "Wow," she said, "I never realized how much money was in her couch." "It can add up," said her father. "The world has a giant problem, and too few think to throw stones that are close at hand. These coins could feed many or save a child's life. And if everyone used their coins to fight hunger, then we might just throw the stone that would send this giant problem crashing to the ground." The little girl smiled, and then she got down on her knees. Together, father and daughter gathered coins from underneath the cushions.
This responsive reading is based on James Luther Adams' essay, Guiding Principles for a Free Faith, On Becoming Human Religiously, Selected Essays in Religion and Society from Beacon Press. We gather as Unitarian Universalists to understand, articulate, and live our liberal religion. David brought down the giant Goliath with 5 smooth stones, but we use our 5 smooth stones to build a more just, loving, and free world. Our first stone reminds us that we are part of a living tradition in which revelation is continuous.
Together, we engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Our second stone reminds us that we freely choose to enter into relationship and community with one another.
Together, as people of conscience, we build relationships of justice, equity, and compassion that further the wholeness of the interdependent web of all existence.
Our third stone reminds us that we have a moral obligation to work toward establishing a just and loving community.
Together, we speak and act prophetically with the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Our fourth stone reminds us that good things happen as a result of human effort.
Together, as beings with inherent worth and dignity, we create goodness and virtue.
Our fifth stone reminds us that the divine and human capacities for achieving meaningful change are reason for optimism.
Together, we may be hopeful that change will occur toward a more just, loving, and free world.
The roots of our living tradition have been developed over centuries, but new ideas and understandings are still being revealed.
Some stones are smooth and polished, while others are newly found and rough.
We are part of this living tradition. Through it, we become whole, and through us, our tradition becomes whole. Amen. I invite all to sing Spirit of Life with our virtual choir. Following the song, we'll enter into a time of silence and then prayer. As you participate at home, remember it's not about the perfection of silence, but the intention. Join with me in singing now.
Spirit of community, God of many names, love abounding. We each come here for different reasons. To connect once more with friends well known, to meet new folks along the way, to be less alone in a world that is both very full and sometimes very isolating amidst the bustle. Some of us are tired, dedicated to the busyness of our work week, struggling to find a job, stress from the tests and the Zooms and the homeworks and the deadlines. We gather to pause between the silence and the joy of this hour, hoping to be renewed in spirit and mind, to be able to appreciate the small wonders of the moments between our obligations. We gather as a community to build loving friendships, to seek justice in our world, to grow our souls, to nurture compassion with every step as best we can. We pray for those among us living with illness, those recovering in a hospital bed, for their family and friends who wish they could ease their burden. May they find healing where it is possible, peace of mind where it is not, and feel the love that ever surrounds them. Mother of compassion, help us to weave real connections in this house of hope, to build community within our walls and beyond, to welcome the stranger wherever they are in their life's journey, and allow ourselves to be changed with every new soul that enters our religious home. In building our community and growing our spirits, We become the stewards of our faith. In a time of prayer, we celebrate and hold Alice Link in our hearts. February 4th, 1921 was a very special day. It was on this day that Alice Link was born. Alice will be 100 years old in just a few weeks on February 4th, 2021. Alice was born in Boston and raised in France. She has many captivating memories of her life in Europe and America. Alice taught for 20 years at Walt Whitman High School in Huntington Station as a French and Spanish teacher. She's a member of the Huntington Historical Society and has been a docent and board member there for over 40 years. She's been a cherished member of our fellowship for many, many years as well. Who remembers Alice's crepes at the Renaissance Fair? Who is aware of her hospitality at special events at our fellowship? Who has enjoyed one of her splendid dinner parties? The Huntington Historical Society has decided to honor her with a car parade on her birthday, February 4th at 1 p.m. If you are interested in being part of this momentous celebration and need to know Alice's address, check your directory or call the office. In addition to cards, if anyone wants to make a contribution to the fellowship for Alice's birthday, please give it to the endowment fund and send your best wishes to Alice. We now invite the gathering to lift up the names of those we wish to hold in all our hearts this hour. Don and Sue, all those in need of hope. Noreen and Vicky, Tom, Hal and Arnold, Carrie, Diane, Ruth Ann, Renita, Jeff and Jessica, Chan, Kellogg family, Earl and Martha, Dan and Kate and Linda, Naomi, Gina, Marion, Rob, Brian, Laura, Tom, Leah, Alice's happy birthday, David, Alice and Dick Richardson, Michael, Marcus, and Demetrius, Joe, our President Joe Biden, Matt, Lois, Mark Klein, Charlie, Jack, Sean, Suzanne. For all these names spoken aloud, and for all those that are written silently on the tablets of our hearts, we pray. And Vince.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one sea. All lifted hearts are free. Many windows, one light, many waters, one sea. All lifted hearts are free.
In the Talmud of the Jewish tradition, the sage Hillel said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to others. This is the whole of the law. All the rest is commentary."
In the Hindu legend of the Mahabharata, the divine Krishna declared, "This is the sum of duty. Do nothing unto others which would cause you pain if done to you. It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one source, all lifted hearts are free.
In the Gospel of Matthew, in the Christian scriptures, the Messiah Jesus says, "Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do so to them."
In the Buddhist text of the Udana Varga, the student is urged, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one source, all lifted hearts are free.
In the Muslim Hadith of Al-Nawawi, the Prophet Muhammad teaches, "No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself."
In the Tai Shang Treatise of Taoism, the seeker is instructed, regard your neighbor's gain as your gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one source, all lifted hearts are free.
In the ancient wisdom of Shinto, there is a saying, "The heart of the person before you is a mirror. See there your own form."
The Oglala Lakota spiritual leader Black Elk wrote, "All things are our relatives. What we do to everything, we do to ourselves. It is written, it is taught, may it be so."
Many windows, one light, many waters, one source, all lifted hearts are free. Shalom, Hasiti, Salam, Hewa, Dohi, Pax, Paxomir, Shanti, 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 Shalom, Hasiti, Salam, Hewa, Dohi, Pax, Paxomir. Peace. 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 Peace.
That was beautifully done, choir. Thank you so much for that piece. I've been heavily inspired by the writings of James Luther Adams. He's a mid-20th century theologian, minister, and academic from the US who lived in Germany in the 1930s and was active in the clandestine resistance to the rise of Nazism. We often take our theologians out of context, and as I talk about his thoughts, keep his experience in Germany in mind. After the breadth of his 40 plus years of writing were complete, folks started pulling together bits and pieces of his thinking, jumbled them together, and came up with some pretty helpful combinations. One such is an essay on the 5 stones. Our responsive reading earlier in the service is one version of them. It's a metaphor back to David and Goliath, as we heard in the Jewish story. A teenager, David, manages to defeat the giant named Goliath on the field of battle with a sling and 5 stones. It's a violent story. The one in scriptures is much more violent than the version we told earlier today, but a course of action that prevented 2 armies from colliding. There was 1 death instead of thousands. For JLA, James Luther Adams, the 5 stones become a metaphor for how we can combat systems of oppression in the world. What are the 5 things we can do that will unbind the oppressed? In modern language, how do we end racism, homophobia, classism, misogyny, fascism, to name a few? What does our liberal faith say about living? I'll paraphrase the much longer piece, which itself is an edit of a sort, using language that might be more familiar to us. This is sort of my edit on it. And we can do the first slide, Lauren. Revelation is not sealed. In the unfolding of the human spirit, we continuously experience life in new ways, and so too does our experience of truth. 2, relationships between people ought to be free. Mutuality and consent are both ethical and theological principles. 3, we have an obligation to work toward creating a beloved community. Our faith inspires us to the work of transformational community that is centered in justice and love. The prophethood of all believers has a corrective effect on systems of oppression. 4, each child that's born is another redeemer. We're all potential sources of good in the world, and each have a role to play. Goodness happens in relationships with one another. And 5, we choose hope. Our resources, both sublime and mundane, hold all the capacity we need to transform the world. This faith statement is central to our UU theology. If you're craving an affirmation or a negation of the nature or existence of God, I can only say again, that's not how we do theology. Our theology is one of testing and observation. If you can go to the next slide now, Lauren. Thank you. When you have questions of purpose, belief, or value, ask yourself, does this thing or view leave room for the ongoing evolution of the human spirit? Does it draw me closer into a community that is mutually supportive? Does it seek to bring more harmony and more equity in those relationships, even if the work is very difficult? Does it falsely make me forget that I have the capacity to live into this holy work? Does it remind me to live with hope? In short, if a teaching helps you move into right relationship with individuals or communities with hope centered in your heart, then it's theologically sound. Our theology is both a faith statement and a process of reflection. Our faith teaches us that we can expect to continue to be inspired, to learn from one another, and to seek out that spiritual growth. Wheresoever we freely choose to enter into communities with one another, we're doing sacred work. Not easy work, not convenient work, but holy work. In this, we are obligated to vigilantly transform systems of oppression with acts of love and compassion. We all have the capacity to make this happen, and everything we need to do so already exists. There is reason to hope in this world. Our sources, our principles, these 5 stones of religious liberalism make up a religious vocation. We are called as religious progressive people to live into these values, to build our character around them, to write their words on the tablets of our hearts, as we say at the end of every prayer. So as the Jewish teaching goes, that it comes from When our hearts break, these words fall into us. And I'll invite Karen for our next part.
Thank you, Jude. This month's split plate is the Family Service League. It was established in 1926, a nonprofit, non-sectarian, community-based human service agency helping Long Islanders in need. Family Service League touches the lives of more than 50,000 each year through its broad array of 60 programs and 20 locations. Their comprehensive network of care serves infants to elders through children and youth education programs, senior services, vocational training, family support counseling, mental health, integrated health care, substance abuse programs, and housing and homeless services, and so much more. You can send a check to the office or donate through the website as seen on your screen. You can also donate through the Give Plus Church app, which can be found in the App Store or Google Play. We hope you'll be able to give generously. Thank you. The second reading, For Nothing is Fixed, by James Baldwin. For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light falls, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out.
Our next video, I had the joy of being invited to take part in this inaugural poem mashup. The concept and production was by our local New Jersey colleague, Reverend Karen Johnston. We heard her, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, tell the story about John Lewis. She's not in this video, but she put it together. And I think it's, as we're celebrating how communities come together, how institutions can survive the threats of fascism, this was a beautiful way to celebrate it. Enjoy.
One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, and charging across the Rockies.
All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues.
In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly we do.
We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peaceful, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice.
Yet today I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one.
Someone is trying to make music somewhere, with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice.
All of us as vital as the one light we move through.
We mean to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go. Who are many people coming together, cannot become one, people falling apart.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose.
Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again.
We know what we have done and what we have said, and how we have grown, degree by slow degree, believing ourselves toward all we have tried to become, just and compassionate, equal, able, and free.
Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division.
One sky toward which we sometimes lift our eyes, tired from work. Some days guessing at the weather of our lives. Some days giving thanks for a love that loves you back.
Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables.
Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country.
Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself. Others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love?
We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burden.
We head home through the gloss of rain or weight of snow or the plum blush of dusk, but always home. All of us facing the stars' hope, a new constellation waiting for us to map it, waiting for us to name it together.
If we can truly remember, they will never forget.
For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it.
Praise song for walking forward in that light.
And say, simply, very simply, with hope, good morning.
Good morning. As we enter into a new stewardship year, I've been thinking a lot about what our faith tradition means to me and what this community means to our little corner of the world. The value of a person, the value of a community, That's what we're talking about today. I'm thinking of all the ways this community has adapted to this impossible year. None of us have been perfect. God knows it's impossible to be ever so. But especially now, our jobs and our norms have been flipped. It can seem impossible. When we allow ourselves to adhere to impossible standards, we implicitly tell the people around us that they should be doing the same thing. When we're overly hard on ourselves, we can nurture a kind of culture that encourages all around us to buy into it too. And in this year of COVID, I see so many people I love striving twice as hard to do half as much and feeling like we're failing. I believe surviving is our main goal this year. Everything extra is stellar. And here, the value of a person is the value of a community. Perfect doesn't leave a lot of room for the people in a community. What do we choose instead to make room for in our lives? What have we made room for in our fellowship? Where sadly still in our world, 90% of kids tend to age out of synagogues and churches, houses of worship after high school in America. First Greta and now Danielle, our religious education coordinator, is leading a ministry here where we're seeing our emerging adults returning back to our fellowship. Our gatherings of 20-somethings when we were in person were ranging from a dozen to 20 people that grew up in our fellowship. And our Wellspring group, Danielle and I co-lead, meets twice a month now. We're building strong ties in our religious education program that creates safe places for our children and youth. It looks very different this year in Zoom, and I hope soon, someday, we get back to in person, but that is out of our control right now. And those safe places for our kids, our youth, may be the only safe place for some of our kids who are dealing with bullying in schools, or coming out as gay, or who identify as a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth. Unitarian Universalism is that place for so many of our kids. I remember at our summer camp, the last time we could be together in person, there'd be moments where I was deeply moved to see how free and safe so many of our LGBTQ kids are in that space, something I didn't have growing up. And it is a powerful blessing we offer our kids. And we're not always perfect, but as a former kid who had to come out, I can tell you that I'd rather a place that was kind and real than a place that was perfect. Why do we come to religious community? We come in our brokenness and our hopelessness and our joy and our yearning and our striving and with our curiosity and seeking love. When we get here, we don't judge us by how snazzy we are, but how caring we are, how connecting we are, how relevant we are. Things aren't always easy. Religious community, this may surprise you, is made up of humans. We're not all shiny all the time, and we all bring with us our personal stories of hope and pain, loss and possibility. We step on one another's toes. We need to repair the roof or the window, and money isn't always easy to find. And we certainly can't do everything. But we grieve that we can't do everything nonetheless. Religious community is not easy. It's hard work if we're doing it right. If we want easy, we can do brunch instead or flip through the Sunday Times. We're doing something hard here that's made even stranger this year. We're doing something countercultural these days. It means we'll be uncomfortable from time to time. Discomfort sometimes is the price of a meaningful life. I think about all the accomplishments in our fellowship's history, building upon one another, and often only shining their benefits onto a later generation of members. We heard earlier in that inaugural poem mashup from one of the poets that our blunders become the next generation's burden. And conversely, our successes, the same. Back in the 80s, when we expanded our building to build our main hall where we all gather in normal times, we laid the groundwork to grow in membership, but we also laid the groundwork to help the community when the need was great. The Huntington Men's Shelter, Hi Hi, was started by this fellowship after a tragic death in the streets, and it is one of our most important and vital ministries. It's hard to say if we would have been in a place to do that ministry if we didn't have the larger space we have now. What was started as a simple or not so simple grounds and capital project to expand our worship hall 20 years later became the foundation for saving lives in the wintertime. And in our increasingly fractured nation, Hi is also bringing us into healthier collaboration with other faith traditions in our town. In the effort to help those in need, it keeps us pushing against the crush of xenophobia and the rise of white nationalism today. We move from charity to solidarity. Hi looks different this year to COVID, but we've adapted to the needs of the times once again. And all of this work has brought us into partnerships with Jobs with Justice, Rural and Migrant Ministries, and ongoing connections with the NAACP that predate Hi. This is the work of what religious community means today. As the formal start of our new canvas, this sermon is in some ways about funding the present and the future of this institution. Many think about budgets and programs and costs and services this time of year. Others ask me, membership, why should I join? What do I get for my money? I'm not sure that's the best way to think about membership. Religious community is not a place where we buy services. That's a store. Religious community is a place where we make commitments, where we promise to stretch ourselves when we're becoming complacent, and where we allow ourselves to be cared for by friends and neighbors when our need is there. I've seen all of this so much over the years here at the fellowship, especially this unusual year. I myself am committing to raise my pledge for next stewardship year by 20% because I don't know how I could have made it through this year without this community. We are a gift to each other. Where we tell each other, these communities are a place where we tell each other that we'll hold one another accountable to helping to heal the corners of the world where we work and we live. And we'll fall down, we'll trip, and we'll help each other back up to do the daily work, the monthly work, the yearly work of building a more just and compassionate world. Where else do we do that work? Where else do we combine caring for the friend and the stranger alike with the work of justice? Many lament that the broader world obviously and painfully continues to struggle with perennial issues of inequality. It feels like the same battles decade after decade. Public discourse becomes less and less civil. People seem less and less engaged. When citizens make public protests, the propaganda machines often chastises and ridicules them. With all that's going on, it's easy to feel lost and ineffective. And I remember the words, these stick with me all the years, Black Lives of UU. Lena Gardner once said after the last election before, we've learned that all of our policies can be undone with a stroke of a pen, but what can't be undone is our relationships with one another. In part, membership here is a commitment to that work. Social justice, compassion, service, and learning constitute our spiritual exercise regimen. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. It'll include sweat and tears from time to time. You're not buying something, you're promising something. Building the world we dream about takes commitment. It takes promises. It requires showing up. Presence and membership are about showing up again and again. And hopefully you will change along the way as you help to nurture and transform our neighborhoods into more loving places. I believe in the healing power of the progressive religious voice. I want those voices alive, well, and loud in our public discourse, now more than ever. I want to foster thriving communities that protect and empower women at a time when the government has recently been trying to legislate their bodies in ways that the government doesn't attempt to do to men. Recently and for a long time. We're seeing that turn around now. Somewhat. I want communities that educate and train citizens about the issues of poverty in our nation, equip us to give the help we can and strengthen our will to change the systems of oppression that make life easier for some and harder for others. I don't believe anywhere else will do this as well or as comprehensively. I want to do this work in a community that is not centered in politics, but in the ethics, in values, and grounded in relationships. I believe in the potential of our government to do what's right, but I don't believe it will do so on its own. Religion at its best is prophetic. It stands up to the vice of power and says, "Not in my name." But we have to be here to do that. And we're not just about outward acts of justice. Imagine a religious home that offers its children and youth award-winning, comprehensive, science-based sexuality education that goes beyond the basics of sex ed, but helps prepare our teens to deal with peer pressure, body image, and relationship building, to value themselves, their bodies, and to value the same for others as well, to learn that no means no, and that no, boys will be boys is not an excuse or an answer. Imagine contributing to a world where our kids are raised and to respect themselves and others. Our whole lives can't be offered over Zoom for a whole host of legal and ethical reasons. And our denomination is putting together some programming that we can support our parents better this year during COVID. And more of that will be coming out in the near future. Imagine a congregation that teaches our children the values and strengths of different faiths in such a way that they are embraced and not feared. That is our religious education program. Even if you don't have kids of your own, I don't have kids of my own. Imagine contributing to the formation of a healthy future. I don't have kids of my own, but I want to live in a world where those are the kids we're raising. That's how we prepare our youngest generation to help heal our world. That is not dollars and cents. That's life-saving, that's life-affirming, that's building a place for all in our neighborhood and communities. And what sets us apart the most is the spirit at the center of our faith. Religious community is a spiritual journey, long and winding, with many choices and forks along the way. In all the great Odyssey stories, the hero travels far afield only to return to where they began and ultimately find themselves. The biggest part of the spiritual journey that we call faith is learning how to find ourselves again. We don't always live as ourselves. We hide or inhibit or push down our hearts, our feelings, sometimes our dreams, too often our kindest or best selves. We come together here and sing every week in community, and I wonder how often our singing grabs our soul's attention and stirs it a little more into life. Life calling to life. Stewardship is in parts taking stock of how well we've connected our hearts to our purpose and making sure it remains nurtured for the years ahead, supporting what matters to us most. When I say life calling to life, I mean knowing in our bones that things matter, that life and relationships matter, remembering to live fully, to live as ourselves as best we can, to live knowing that life and relationships matter in our bones. The religious path is one where we can help one another remember that too. I'll close with how we began our service every week. In religious community, we nurture our individual spirits through caring for one another and helping to heal the world. Our spirits are nurtured through care for one another together. Our mission reminds us that we're never alone, that we're here for one another. Institutions are our bedrock in times of turmoil. We will continue to be a place of support, a place of organizing against that which defies our highest values, and a place of challenge when we fall into complacency. As we begin a new stewardship year, I encourage you to support this institution so that in the coming year and years, we can continue to be a beacon in a world that needs more places of compassion and spirit, places that live to remind us all we're not alone. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again.
remember, don't sign off. We now invite you to join us at our annual stewardship event, which will begin in about 6 minutes or so of transitioning music. So if you need to step away to take a break, please do that. But come right back for the camaraderie, the inspiration, and the fun, including, I hear, a not to be missed feature performance by Ken and Rich Bewley Neemore. We'll be here on this same link. So I hope to see you soon in about 6 minutes. Thanks.